We made it to segment 11, God Cares, part 11, and we're going to get Jacob home. Jacob has spent 20 years in Mesopotamia, and now it's time for him to head home. He's got permission from God, and it's time to load up, pack up the family, get the RV loaded, put Granny on top of the truck, and head out. So Genesis 31:17, we read, then Jacob rose up, set his sons and his wives upon camels. And I always think, man, he must have had a bunch of camels for as many kids he had and everything else. So he loaded them up, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, just his. He didn't go out and scour the neighborhood, pick up any strays or anything like that. He just took what was his, which he had gotten in Padanaram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images. One of the translations has the household idols from the Hebrew. He had stolen the household idols, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, that were her father's. The Hebrew word for images is teraphim, and it's a kind of a household god. If you were raised Roman Catholic, you'd have little statues and candles around the house. So it's kind of like that people would pray to. So it's that the teraphim is a household god, okay? And it illustrated that the idolatry of Babylonia still claimed to Laban's family. Remember when we did Judges 17 and 18, we got Micah's house of gods. It got to be such a place. Go on down here to Micah's house of God and take a left. You'll find an In-N-Out burger down there. So it got to be so big that they charged admission to come in and check out his gods. So he had a bunch of teraphims in there. So verse 20 now.
And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled.
Jacob leaving like this showed the prudence and necessity of departing secretly. Laban was capable of trying to detain him and his family with violence or deception. When life itself is in danger for you and your loved ones, the law of self-preservation prescribes the duty of immediate flight. I mean, that's why the devil tempted Jesus first, with self-preservation, right? He tempted him with, look, I know you're hungry. Turn those rocks into food. They could be little pizza rolls or something, because you need to eat. If you're going to stay alive, you need to eat. So just go turn the rocks into food, right? Jesus, you say, Jesus, you need nourishment now, but I can help if you want to. It won't cost you too much. Luke 4:3-4. The Hebrew reads that he deceived the heart of Laban. Okay. Figuratively, it's synecdoche of the part put for knowledge. Rachel stole Laban's idols, and Jacob stole Laban's heart. She may have taken them as part of, right away people immediately think, like I did, was that she took them to worship them because they've been around, the family idols. But she may have taken them as part of her inheritance, since she was giving nothing by her father. Remember, her and Leah said, yeah, we might as well get out of here. Our dad isn't giving us anything. He won't give us our allowance anymore. Whoever possessed the teraphim, though, was due a double portion of the primary heir. So she may have felt that for all of Jacob's efforts, he deserved more. So she just went ahead and took them. Verse 21.
So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river Euphrates, and set his face toward the Mount Gilead, perpetual fountain. And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. And he took his brethren with him, and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob, either good or bad.
God informed Laban, in no uncertain terms, that he must not try to entice Jacob to return by giving him an attractive offer. How about if I double your wages? I might have another daughter or something, He must not say anything bitter. He must not make any threats against Jacob for leaving. Laban knew he dare not touch Jacob, but there will be a war of rhetoric against each other. When Abraham's servant told how God had made his journey prosperous by leading him straight to Rebekah, remember Abraham sent his servant, Laban had answered it was of God, so he couldn't say anything against it. He recognized it was God's will. And here he realizes that it's God talking to him again. So he is smart. He obeys. Verse 25, then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in Mount of Gilead. So we got both of them in camp on different mountains, mountainous areas facing each other. They set up camp, and in the middle, they have the ring. So, all right, verses 26 to 28.
And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, with tabret, with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing.
This sounds so wonderful and sincere. Laban acts like he's totally innocent of any wrongdoings that caused Jacob to leave, and that Jacob was the one in the wrong for doing so. And he then proceeds to tell Jacob that he has the power, he has the weaponry, he's got armed militia with him to do him harm. But God prevents him from doing so. 29, it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father, right? He doesn't say our, the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore, why did you steal my gods? So what do we got here? You serve, it was your God, the God of your father, but my God you took right away. That tells us a lot. Laban's reference to Jacob's God as the God of your father, while referring to the stolen images as my gods. Laban implies that the reason they left the way they did was because they stole his gods. Quick, grab his gods, let's get out of here. Jacob corrects him, telling him that it was because of concern for his and his family's lives. We continue in verse 31.
And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent, and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images, and put them in the camel's furniture, or his saddle, and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images.
Gee, I wonder what the custom of women is. It's now Jacob's turn to counter Laban's bullying. Retaliation on his part was natural concerning the circumstances. And when passion is high, his accusations covered a wide range. He enumerated his grievances over 20 years in a tone of unrestrained severity, describing the harsh nature and frustrations that he faced because of his uncle. With the hardships he also had to patiently endure, he also thought that Laban had made up the theft of his figurines so he could search their possessions. Verse 36. And Jacob was just really meek and he was pissed, right? And he chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? Where is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Where hast thou searched all my stuff? What hast thou found of all my household stuff? Set it here before my brother and thy brethren, so you can judge between the both of us. At this 20 is the number of disappointed expectations, by the way. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young. The rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day of the drought. The heat consumed me. That area would get to be 120 degrees. And the frost, the cold by night. In the morning, it'd be like 50 degrees, and it'd warm up to 120 degrees during the day. You'd think we had boot temperature swings here. That area, so by the cold by night, the heat during the day, and my sleep departed from my eyes. See, the Eastern shepherd's life was not an easy one. He was often away from his home for weeks at a time. Variations in climate, from too hot to too cold, would plague the shepherds, as would animals looking for a meal. The herds would need to be protected against bandits who tried to steal from the herd. There were many other discomforts that had to be endured in that profession. Jacob defends his reputation and honesty in the face of Laban's unjust accusations and injustices. Verse 41.
Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight.
Laban was somewhat constrained because of the fear of Isaac's God, the God of Abraham, whom Jacob also worshiped. Laban had been extremely dishonorable and selfish with Jacob. These 2 relatives, though, after having given utterance to their pent-up feelings, came at length to a mutual understanding, or rather, God influenced Laban to make reconciliation with Jacob. Proverbs 16, 6 and 7.
By mercy and truth, iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord men depart from evil. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him.
Laban still refuses to accept the fact that Jacob had earned what he had. Laban is still laying claim to Jacob's family and all Jacob had. Since God had intervened already, there really was nothing Laban could do but whine about it. Thus, Laban asked Jacob to make a covenant as a witness between them. He probably also feared that since God's hand was continuing to make Jacob stronger and him weaker, this would stop any future retaliation that Jacob might want to pursue in the future. Hey, let's shake hands on this one, 5 verse 43.
And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, These daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? Now therefore, come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Yager Sahadutha. Aramaic is witness heap. But Jacob called it Gilead, the same meaning in Hebrew, witness heap. And Laban said, This heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Gilead. And Mitzpah, which means watchtower, the place of separation, to keep it rigidly apart. For he said, The Lord watch between me and thee, when we are absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee.
The covenant between the 2 was ratified by a heap of stones. Jacob set up a stone as a memorial pillar, and his relatives piled stones in a heap. These would mark the boundaries between Laban in the north and Jacob in the south. The heap was a reminder that Jacob must not despise Laban's daughters, and Laban was never to seek vengeance against Jacob for his conduct. Verse 51, and Laban said to Jacob, Behold this heap, behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. And heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. And now he continues with the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. Nahor is an idolater. That was Abraham, So the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. And then Jacob's response to that was, I'm going to swear by the God of an idolater, Nahor. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, who was also the God of Abraham. So he left the God of Nahor out of it. Then Jacob offered sacrifice unto the mount, called his brother to eat bread. They did eat. They tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning, Laban rose up, kissed his sons and his daughters, which would include the grandchildren. He blessed them, and Laban departed and returned unto his place. Laban added an oath to the covenant, calling on the God of Abraham and the gods of Nahor, the gods of their fathers, to judge between them. Jacob just ignores the gods of Nahor, and took his oath only in the name of the one true God, who was the fear of the one reverenced by Isaac. So now we move on to Genesis 32 and see what's next for Jacob. He just handled one crisis. Let's see if there's something else coming up. And Jacob went on his way. So he's heading south, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, it's God's host. And he called the name of the place Mahanaim, which means two hosts, or two camps, or two encampments, meaning God's encampment and his encampment. The angels were to assure him that God's presence had always been with him, and of God's continuing protection as he headed back to the land of his family, to first face his brother Esau. Psalm 34:7.
The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. Psalm 103:20. Bless the Lord, ye his angels, that excel in strength, that do his commandments, hearkening unto the voice of his word.
This occurrence on his return to Canaan was similar to the angels first appearing to him on his way to the household of Laban in Genesis 28. Remember, he fought on the Stargate that opened up and angels were coming and going from heaven. Right. It was an encouraging pledge of the continued presence and protection of God in the face of the unknown as he prepared for his return. So he got rid of one troublemaker, Laban, and he's moving right into where Esau. Meanwhile, 20 years ago, Esau wanted to kill him. I don't know where he's at today. Genesis 32, verse 3. So Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. So we're south of the Dead Sea. That's where Edom. And he commanded them, saying, thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau. Now, you're going to see him, his words are chosen very well here, right? That you shall speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob said thus, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen and asses and flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in thy sight. He's putting himself, as the underling in all of this. Jacob sent messengers as a prudent precaution to ascertain the present temper of Esau, since he was approaching the area where he now lived. They were to tell Esau that after 20 years with Laban, Jacob has an abundance of wealth, so he doesn't need anything. He requests nothing. He just is simply returning to his native land. He also wanted to communicate to Esau that he could not just pass without notifying his arrival to his brother and paying homage of his respectful homage. Acts of civility tend to disarm opposition and often hatred. Ecclesiastes 10:4. I like this verse so much, I'm going to give you 4 translations. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. The Septuagint reads, it is the spirit of the rule. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, resign not thy place. Don't quit your job. For a reconciliation will mollify great offenses. Lamb's translation. If the tempter of the ruler rises against you, if the temper of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your country, because healing forgives many sins. Or English Standard Version reads, if the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for calmness will lay great offenses to rest. He refers to himself as thy servant Jacob, even though he is spiritually Lord over his brother. Remember, his brother's the elder, but he's spiritually, because he's got the birthright and the blessing, he's spiritually Lord over his brother, but he's coming across as, thy servant Jacob, my Lord Esau. This shows that he's trying to assume the most kind and respectful bearing. Genesis 32:6, and the messengers returned to Jacob, and they said, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he's coming out here to meet you. He can't wait to see you. Guess what? He's going to bring 400 men with him. Not quite the response you were expecting from him. This was terrifying news. It overwhelmed him with anguish. He felt sure that Esau was intending to destroy him. Verse 7 and 8.
Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him and the flocks and herds and the camels into 2 bands, and said, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape.
In this great emergency, Jacob now chooses to pray. This prayer is short, earnest, and bearing directly on the occasion. It was the prayer of a kind husband, an affectionate father, a firm believer in the promises God had made to him. Verse 9.
And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which said unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude.
The appeal is made to God as standing in a covenant relation to his family. He pleads the special promise made to him of a safe return. And after a most humble and touching confession of unworthiness, it breathes the prayer breathes an earnest desire for deliverance from impending danger. Verse 13, so he lodged there that same night, and he took of that which came to his hand a present. He got a present together for Esau, his brother. This present consisted of 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, 10 fowls, and a partridge in a pear tree. And he delivered them into the hand of the servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, put a space betwixt drove and drove. He commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meets thee, and asks thee, saying, whose are those? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's, and it is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold also, he's behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall you speak unto Esau when you find him. And say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob's behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me. That's the purpose of why he's doing all of this, that I will appease him with this present. And afterward, I can see his face. Peradventure, he will accept of me. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. So Jacob combined active efforts with earnest prayer. And that is a great lesson for everyone, to not depend upon the aid and intervention of God in such a way as to replace the actions of prudence and foresight. Like God's given us a brain, use it along with prayer. You pray to God, but you think through the situation. They work together. And then you take necessary actions as God inspires you. If God tells you not to do anything, good. But if he doesn't say that, then you go, oh, I just prayed about it. God will take care of it. It doesn't work that way. Right? Too many people just throw it out there like that. Prayer, active efforts. Superiors are always approached with presents. It's funny because they're also called bribes. Many people do things because of the presence of other people. You could call them bribes because they really are at times. And the respect expressed is estimated by the quality and amount of the gift. Jacob's present consisted of 550 head of cattle of different kinds, the best from his flock, those that would be most prized by Esau. Now, the milch camels alone were of immense value. They were one of the most prized possessions of Arab wealth. Their milk is a chief part of the diet, along with other varied uses. So, giving them 30 milk camels and some younger ones. Oh man, that was giving them tremendous amount of wealth. The messengers were strictly commanded to say the same words, that Esau might be more impressed and that the uniformity of the address might appear more clearly to have come from Jacob himself. This was designed to weaken any fury he might still have against his brother. This was a magnificent present that he was giving his brother, skillfully arranged and balanced. Esau's passion would have time to cool as he passed each successive company. Because with the company, what are these? These are all for you. It's a present. It's a gift. And okay, and if it's refused, the others then could hasten back and warn us that Esau is not ready to accept any presents. Okay, verse 22.
And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had.
That night Jacob could not rest, so he sent his family, attendants, and the rest of his possessions across the river Jabbok. He remained behind to seek anew in silent prayer the divine blessing on his tactics that he had set in motion. Verse 24.
And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man or an angel with him until the breaking of the day.
Now, some think, including Dr. Lamza, that as he fell asleep, he saw a vision wrestling with an angel. And that contest lasted all night. Every time he'd wake up in the night, he was still fighting that angel. Angel in Aramaic means God's counsel. So the angel was symbolic of his brother Esau. The Lord had answered Jacob's prayers and revealed it to him. So that's one way of looking at it. The other one is actually wrestling with an angel, and they couldn't tag for a while and send in somebody else. They were at it all night. Verse 25. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow, the hip socket of his thigh, and the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." And he said, "I'm not going to let you go except you bless me." So, what's your name? And he said, "I'm Jacob." And the angel said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, supplanter, contender, but you're going to be known as Israel," which means God commands, or God orders or rules. For as a prince, for as a commander or an orderer, hast thou power, hast thou contended with God and with men, and has prevailed, has been successful. You can call wrestling with the angel a draw. Okay? Israel is a prince who is a commander of God or an orderer of God. Thus, he is favored and beloved of God. He was Jacob, a cunning, self-helpful supplanter, expressive of his old history. Now he is favored of God as a prince of God, one who would have power or would contend with God and men and prevail. Jacob had contended with Esau in the womb, and thus got his name Jacob, which is referred to in reproach, not in eulogy. He had contended for his birthright and succeeded. There's the verses to look at. He had contended for the blessing and succeeded. That's chapter 27. He had contended with Laban and succeeded. Verse chapter 31. He had contended with men and succeeded. Now he contends with God and fails. Hence his name was changed to Israel, El being God. God commands. To teach him the greatly needed lesson of dependence upon God, not his own subtlety. But by this time, Jacob has lived a few years, and he had a great father-in-law in Laban. It probably was good for Jacob and Laban to be together, because one was always trying to outdo the other one. Now he is one favored of God. He went from Jacob a supplanter to Israel, one favored of God. Let me say this, is that there's two schools of thought. There's the vision, and there's the actual physical thing of him wrestling the angel at night. I'm not sure which one is there. There's arguments for both of them, but I'll leave that for you and for further research if you would like. Hosea 12, 3-5, Bob.
He took his brother by the heel in the womb, and by his strength he had power with God. Yea, he had power over, or he struggled with the angel, and prevailed. He wept and made supplication unto him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spake with us. Even the Lord God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial.
Yeah, Hosea is talking about Jacob and explaining what he, as an illustration for their time. Genesis 32 now, we pick it up in verse 29.
And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, the face of God. For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Penuel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted, or he limped upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow socket of the thigh unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank.
This is a tradition of man. This is not a commandment of God for the Jewish people today. Genesis 33 now, we go into the next chapter, and Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came. And here he comes with the 400 men. And he divided the children. He put Leah out there first. He divided the children unto Leah, unto Rachel, and the two handmaids. And he put the handmaids and the children foremost. Then Leah and her children after. And finally, Rachel and Joseph, not hindermost. And he passed over before them. He bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So as his brother with the 400 men come up, I got this old Western look, there comes all these horses in, and big, I don't know if they were on horses or asses or camels or walking, but you got 400 of them coming in, right? And then he bows 7 times. You go all the way down, and then you come up, you step a couple steps, you bow again, and then finally, what bowing 7 times does, it indicates a completeness of humility and was customarily done before kings. Each bow would get you closer and closer to at the end of the 7th, you would stand in the presence of your superior. So after wrestling with the angel of God, and we see the input that he had continued with the angel of God and also with men and had succeeded, Israel awaited his brother, being confident that he would prevail against his brother. Psalm 27:3 says, Though a host should encamp against me, my heart should not fear. Though war should arise against me, in this will I be confident. Despite Jacob's concern, he has a favorable meeting with Esau. And they got up, he bowed, right? He's real close to him right there. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, fell on his neck, kissed him, and they wept together. What a sudden and surprising change. The cherished enmity of 20 years in a moment disappeared. The weapons of war were laid aside, and the warmest tokens of mutual affection reciprocated between the brothers. The secret, sufficient, subduing influence of God's grace had converted Esau from an enemy into a friend. Proverbs 21:1 says, The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turns it whithersoever he will. So let's pick it up in verse 5. What happens next, Bob?
And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near, and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep thou that thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight. then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God. Being in your presence is like being in God's presence. And thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it.
The acceptance by a superior is a proof of friendship, and by an enemy of reconciliation. It was on both accounts. Jacob was so anxious that his brother should receive the cattle. Had Esau refused Jacob would never have been in peace. The refusal to accept the gift means permanent enmity. Esau would have sooner or later sought vengeance from him. The gift was a token of reconciliation, understanding, and of everlasting peace. The gift healed the wound and repaired the breach, which was caused by jealousy. In Esau's acceptance, he had the strongest proof that peace had been established between them. Verse 12.
And he said, let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto him, my Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds are young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord, unto Seir.
Jacob declined Esau's invitation to accompany him throughout the country with an objection that was believable. He did not need any worldly assistance or equipage. They part ways cordially, realizing that they were still very different in spirit, character, and habits. Jacob, a man of God, and Esau, a man of the world. It would have been a massive risk that could have easily led to something arising to disturb the harmony that now exists. So you go on ahead. Everybody's too young and too slow. We don't want to slow you down. Verse 15.
And Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he saith, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way into Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him a house, and made booths for his cattle. And therefore the name of the place is called Succoth, or booths, or shelters. And Jacob came to Shalom, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of a field, where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar, and called it Elohi Israel, God, the God of Israel.
When he crossed the Jordan River and came peaceably, safely, and unharmed to the city of Shechem, 31 miles north of Jerusalem, and camped near the city, this was the culmination of his journey from Adamaran back into the promised land, back into Canaan. God had fulfilled his promise, the promise that he'd made in Genesis 28:15.
And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of.
There he purchased the land, built an altar unto God, a most suitable conclusion to his journey, and a lasting memorial of a distinguished favor in the name of God, the God of Israel. Though free from foreign troubles, Jacob is now going to face a great domestic calamity that he has to deal with concerning his only daughter. So he's going from Laban to Esau to problems at home. 34:1, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Now it's probable that she had been often and freely mixing in the society of the country, and had been flattered by the attention of the ruler's son. There must have been time and opportunities of acquaintance to produce the strong attachment that Shechem had for her. Verse 2, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince or chief ruler of the country, saw her, He took her, lay with her, and defiled, violated, disgraced her. You just don't, you know, you just don't take one look and go, hey, walk over and rape somebody. That's so they probably had seen each other and had talked to each other, spent some time together for the depth of this kind of intensity of his love for her. And because his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. And he loved the damsel. He felt deeply attached to the young woman. I mean, this isn't Hollywood love at first sight stuff. And spake kindly unto the damsel. He did not push her away, but rather he spoke to her heart. He's seeking to win her affection. Since marriages were arranged, Shechem asked his father to negotiate a wedding. Verse 4, so Shechem spake unto his father Hamor and said, get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field. And Jacob held his peace until they were come. Jacob, as a father and a good man, must have been deeply distressed, but he could do very little. In a family with different wives, it is not the father, but the full brothers on whom the protection of the daughters devolves. They are the guardians of a sister's welfare and the avengers of her wrongs. Thus her brothers, Simeon and Levi, are bent on revenge. Verse 6.
And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved, and they were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you, give him to wife, and make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you, and ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get your possessions therein.
It seems that Hamor and his son Shechem are acting honestly, but their conduct was unjustifiable in neither expressing regret. Hamor suggested that the two communities intermarry and become one large entity. Hamor was seeking the blessings and wealth of Israel. Jacob knew it was contrary to intermingle with unbelievers and their idols. We continue, verse 11.
And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me, I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me. But give me the damsel to wife. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said unto them, we cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if ye will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised, then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters unto us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if ye will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter, and will be gone. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son, and the young man deferred not to do the thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father.
The evil plot was hatched. The honor of their family consisted in having the sign of the covenant. Circumcision was the external rite by which persons were admitted members of Israel. But you don't hear of any teaching about the worship of the true God being mentioned here, do you? No. Hypocrisy and deceit, in all cases vicious, are infinitely more so when accompanied with a show of religion. It was used to cloak their cruel scheme of treachery under the pretense of conscientious scruples. Verse 20, and Hamor and Shechem, his son, came into the gate of their city and communed with the men of the city. Everybody get up here, come on up here. You're your king, your puppet king, your guy in charge here. He's got something to say, everybody. All right, these men are peaceable with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade therein. For the land, behold, it's large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives. Let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. I guess he had to explain what that was then to everybody. Right. Shall not, now here's the real reason as to why Hamor and Shechem like this. Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they'll dwell with us. And unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of the city, and every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. See, Shechem had stirred their greed. Circumcision would be a small price to pay for all the wealth of Israel. So they agreed. They were circumcised, and Shechem took Dinah home as his wife. Verse 25, though.
And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, they were still in pain, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house, and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain, and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep, their oxen, and their asses, and that which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house.
Simeon and Levi were full brothers of Dinah, and they led this slaughter of all the unsuspecting men who were in pain at home recovering. They took Dinah back, and they plundered the city. Verse 30, and Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. And they responded, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? We had to do something. We can't have her, he dealt with her like a harlot. We got to do something. So Jacob was not pleased. His son did not feel remorseful because they felt justified because of the actions of Shechem. For many reasons, it was now time to vacate the area quickly. So under God's direction, off to Bethel they would go. 35:1, and God said unto Jacob, arise, go to Bethel, and dwell there, make thee an altar unto God, and that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother.